I felt this word specifically that's been on my heart about kingdom of priests, a kingdom of priests. And I know that's a phrase we kind of throw around a lot, but I feel like your church is probably really good at it. You guys have a lot of mature believers and saints here, but in my generation and in younger than me, no one really understands to a degree what this means to be a priesthood, a royal priesthood before the Lord. We have kind of this mentality of like, well, there's the pastors and the ministers, and then there's everyone else in the body of Christ. And I have this passion, I feel like the Lord's been putting on my heart more and more and more to convince every believer, no, you're the minister, you're the priesthood, you're the priest to your business, you're the priest to your children, you're the priest at Starbucks. Starbucks needs priests, right? You're the priest to walk in and carry the presence of God and minister to people. And I felt like the devil has tried so hard to convince the average Joe Christian that they're not a priest, let the professional minister person do it. And he's tried to take out the heart of the believer through pain or through drama or church split or experience or age. You're too young, you're too old, you're too inexperienced, you're way overly experienced to where you're not relevant anymore, you're too out of it, you're too, like, there's all these excuses, or there's hurts, or there's pains, but the devil has been attacking the heart of the believer to do what? To get them to no longer minister as priests to people. And he's been working so hard to convince, I say you, I don't really mean you, because you're amazing at this, I believe it, right? But everyone else, Christians, he's been trying to convince, and I feel like the Lord has been doing this heart transplant thing where he's been reawakening the believer to realize, no, I have a calling as a priest of the Lord everywhere I go. So can I talk about that a little bit today? And I felt as this word was stirring in my heart, my wife and I, we went out to Nashville. We had a wedding out there. Her cousin was getting married. We flew out to Nashville. I'd never been to Nashville before. Anyone here been there? It was a cool spot. We went down by the river. It was like Tuesday in the afternoon, and every building had music going. It was like, what is this place, right? Every floor had another musician playing, and we're like, man, imagine if the Lord had this like worship. That would be so cool. But we're down there. We're just doing the tourist thing to see Nashville real quick. And we're walking and we're so hungry. We were total rookies. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't know the whole thing was kind of downhill. Now we're walking back uphill with our child who's really tired, and we're exhausted and we're hungry and we're trying to, right? So we're going uphill and we're going with her family. So her uncle was with us and was talking about how hungry he was. And we looked over and we see this burger place called White Castle. Have you guys ever been to White Castle before? Okay, the only thing I knew about White Castle was like at Costco, they have these microwavable sliders for White Castles. And my friend loves them and they bring them over. And all I know is they taste like rubber and I get heartburn if I have them. So that's all I knew about White Castle. So we see the actual White Castle, right? And I thought that was a myth, like a legend. I didn't know it was real, And we see it and I laugh and I say, oh, we got to get a picture of White Castle for my friend who loves these little rubber heartburn sliders, and her uncle says, why are you laughing? That's where we're going for lunch. And I'm thinking, oh okay. So we go into White Castle, and when we're in there, my son is running around doing his Ezra thing, which is the cutest in the world. He's running around, and everyone, of course, is like, oh, your son's so cute, And this one guy says, oh, how old is your son? And he says, I just had a child like 2.5 months ago. And he pulls out his phone, because every parent wants to show photos of their child. And he pulls out his phone and he says, oh, this is my boy. And it was an adorable little baby. But what was different is the baby was in a hospital bed and had tubes going all over in him. And then he said, my son was born with a bad heart. His heart stopped like immediately. And they said they miraculously got it going right after birth. And they said that his heart kept stopping. And they said, your son already needs a heart transplant. And every few days they have to get his heart going again. And they said, he's not going to make it a week. Miraculously, he's still in the hospital. But he said, it's been 80 days. And he was still wearing the hospital bands. And he said, this is my first time really leaving the hospital. And he's like, and he looked like he'd just been through it. You ever have one of those times he's just going through it? And he said, and I saw White Castle and was like, I don't even care. I'm getting White Castle right now. So he just walked in, right? And he said, my son, yesterday, they said, there's no way he's going to live. And then they said, well, he's got like a 1% chance. Then they said he's going to need a heart transplant. Miraculously, he lived all the way to the point where he said, 2 days ago, my son got a heart transplant. And he said they flew it in on jets from across the country because they only had a few hours to get the heart into him. And they got it into this little baby. They got a heart that would work for him. And the baby wakes up, and they said within 20, 30 minutes or whatever after coming out of it, the baby looked at his dad and started giggling. And this man's in tears, and he says, they say my baby's going to live. He's going to make it. And then this man starts preaching the gospel to us. He doesn't know I'm a pastor or missionary or what I do. And he starts preaching about the love of God and how God met his prayers and how God is saving his family. And we're like, you're the priest of White Castle. Like, he doesn't care who's listening, because when you have a testimony, you don't care who's listening. You just got to tell somebody of the goodness of God. So he's teaching all of us about the love of God here in White Castle, and we're just letting him preach on this thing. And then we say, can we pray for you and pray for your son? He said, yes, absolutely. And I say, what is your son's name? And he looks at me. He says, my son's name is Cohen. Okay, this is what's interesting is I've been studying this word about the priesthood, how the devil has been trying to take out the priest, the body in the body, and the Lord has been saving the priests and bringing them back. And this call to the priesthood of the believer. The Hebrew word for priest is Cohen. Now, you may think that is like a weird coincidence. Taylor, you're looking into it. But then the man stops me and he says, and do you know what the word Cohen means? And I'm sitting there like, say it. Like, come on, say it. And he goes, it means priest. And I'm thinking, yeah. And he said, my son is named priest, and God saved his priest, right? And I'm thinking immediately, this is a symbol of what God is doing in his generation and in our generation, how the Lord is raising up every believer to realize he's a priest, and the devil has been trying to take them out. But when we've looked at this next generation and we've said, oh, they're so bad, there's no way they're going to make it, they're so far gone, there's a 1% chance, right? America's too far gone. What's been happening is the Lord has been flying in with his jets, his power strikes, his encounters, his glory, and he has been meeting and saving, and he's been taking hearts of stone and he's been transplanting them into hearts of flesh again. And he's been taking the very ones that you would say there's no way, and he's saying, that's my priest. And he's been saving them just miraculously. And so I felt like the Lord is saying, I've been raising up these Cohens. I've been saving my priests, and I've been activating them. And so this is a prophetic word, I believe, for this hour, is the awakening of every believer to know that they are a part of the priests. And so I just want to talk a little bit today about the priesthood. And I know you all know this, like I said, but it's for me, that where did it come from, and what does it mean for us to walk as priests before the Lord? So the priesthood, many people could say it started in all these different places in the Bible. The real clear spot, though, I want to focus on is really when the Lord calls out the priesthood after Exodus. So Moses, the Israel, that whole story. How many of you have seen Prince of Egypt or the old Charlton Heston movie, right? Is that his name? Is that the guy? Okay, I never saw it. I've just heard about it in legends, right? So, but I hear it's good. But I saw Prince of Egypt. And so that miraculous, amazing moment, they cross the Red Sea, and it's wonderful, right? They get saved out of slavery, and they've been in slavery for 400 years, and it's this amazing moment. So here's the thing, is they have been slaves for 400 years. That was their identity. In a lot of ways, I'm a slave. What am I going to do with my life? I'm probably going to be a slave, right? What did my dad do for his career? He was a slave. What did my grandpa do? He was a slave. What did my daddy's daddy do? He was a slave. Like, it is so deeply ingrained. This is who you are. You're a slave. And then in a moment, the Lord takes them out of slavery, like when we get saved from the slavery of sin. And in a moment, he says, you are no longer a slave. But how many know if you just take something out, you got to put something stronger back in, right? And so this identity of I'm not a slave gets taken out of them. But then here's the question, well, what are we, right? We've been slaves forever. What are we? Are we a tribe, or like what are we? What's our identity now, And the Lord says this to them in the desert right after that. In Exodus 19:6, he said, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So what is he takes away slavery, and what does he give them? The priesthood. That's the replacement. He says, you are a priest now and a nation. You're your own nation. You're your own kingdom. I'm the king, and you are all my priests. And they would have understood priesthood in the sense of like the Egyptian gods and this high-class people who worship. But he says, no, it's not like that. All of you are priests. Men, women, children, all ages, all experiences. Your birthright citizenship for being in Israel is that you are a priest. This is what you get now in replacement of slavery. And many of us, though, well, I guess I want to talk a little bit about the roles, though, what that means. Because when I heard priest growing up, all I knew was like the Catholic priest guy, right? I'm like, so what does that mean? Do I sit in a box and confess to you? You know, what does it mean? I just didn't know. And I find a lot of people in my generation have no idea what it means when they think priest. The closest they can think of is pastor, maybe. And so what did that mean to be a priest? Well, in Exodus 28:1, God kind of describes, he goes on later in Exodus and other books to describe the role of the priest. And he says this, though, first off, he says that the priest in Exodus 28:1, he says that they were to serve me as priests. So what do we know about priests? Number one job is what? Serve God. Then he says in Deuteronomy 10:8, he says that they are to stand before the Lord and to minister to him and to bless in his name to this day. This is another role of the priesthood is what? Minister to God, serve God, bless God to this day. Have you heard him talk about the priest doing things for other people yet? No, he's talking about the first role is actually ministering to the Lord as their first role. Did you know that God is a ministry? Right? We have all the different ministries. We have children's ministry where we minister to the kids. You know, I love that ministry. It's a lifesaver now that I have children. You know, we have youth ministry. I was a youth pastor for many years. We have homeless ministry, marriage ministry. Often when we think of ministry, we think about God helping people. We think about him pouring into people. And that is totally, it's legitimate ministry, right? But just like there's a youth ministry, homeless ministry, marriage ministry, did you know there's a God ministry where he's the subject? Like we're ministering to him, blessing him, serving him, loving him. And you may say to me, well, Taylor, all of them are God ministries. And of course, that's 100% true. But here's the thing. If I was mean to my son, if I was like an abusive dad, my wife would have a problem with me, right? I would not be ministering to her if I was mean to his child or to her child, right? Ministering and loving my son is indirectly also loving my wife. Of course, 100%. So when you are ministering to the homeless, Jesus said, you're not just doing it to them, you're doing it unto me, right? So that 100%, that is ministry to the Lord. But I want to clarify, that is still different though than when I take her on a date, tell her she's beautiful, love her, do the dishes, vacuum, whatever it is, right? Serving specifically, like this would mean a lot to her, so I'm going to do this for her. Imagine if I ignored her and said, I'm only going to focus on my son because that is ministry to her, right? It's like, well, no, it needs to be both, right? And we've made ministry about the people, but first and foremost, the role of a priest was to minister to our spouse, Jesus, to minister to the Lord first. To pour out, bless him. So what was the first role of the priest was to minister to God himself, to bless him, pour into him. And this was a gift. This wasn't like a chore. This was in Numbers 18 verse 7. He says, I give your priesthood as a gift. A gift. This seems so strange that he says, as a gift, I'm going to give you this role to minister to me. That sounds weird. It's almost like, that would be like at your birthday party. I said, I got you a great gift this year. And you were like, what? What's the gift? And I said, my friendship for the next year. You would be like, oh, great. Awesome. Like that's what it feels like, right? But no, we don't realize it's not like that. God's not being selfish. God is not being weird about it. It's the greatest gift for him to call you to minister to himself. It is a gift of the Lord. And so how is this possible? You see, God knows, God's pretty humble in himself. He knows who he is. God knows he's perfect love. God knows he's perfect justice. God knows that there's something inside of you designed to need him. He also knows that you become like the one that you behold. This is why he says, when you worship idols, you will start to do disgusting things like idols. If you worship celebrities, they're American idols, right? If you worship them, you become like them. You see even kids do this. Their hair starts being like them. They start talking like them. There's something in the human heart that longs to look and behold and copy someone. And so when God says, do that unto me, he knows that he's transforming you into love. He's showing you true justice. He also knows it's a gift, because if you're nervous about your mortgage or your rent, and then you worship the God who owns everything, your issue starts to dwindle when you start to realize how amazing he is. So it's weird. It's not like we're sitting here asking, give me faith, give me faith, give me faith. And that's good prayer. But at the same time, when you just start declaring who he is, your faith begins to rise. Because you're not focusing on you, you're focusing on him. And so actually, he's so good in that when you minister to him, it ministers back to you. It's amazing, right? He's so good. It's like the gift of loving my wife. Right? That's a gift. Like Pastor Matt was saying it. When you love, that's your gift. Loves to love, right? That's the gift he gives me, is letting me look upon him and love him. And two of my amazing friends just walked in, which is wild, and they're getting married in a few months. And it's their greatest gift. David's greatest gift is to love Diana. He's not like, it's not a chore. He's like, thank you for the gift of letting me love you, right? And that's what the Lord's doing here with the priesthood. He's saying, I'm giving you this gift of letting you see me and behold me. And it's actually going to transform you. The one who ministers to God the most will become the most like him. The one who beholds him the most will become the most like him. The one who loves on him the most will actually walk in the most power, right? Because I'm like, well, my God's a healer. I know that because I minister to him all the time, and he's a healer. So now I go to you and I pray for you, and I'm like, it has nothing to do with me. He's a healer. And we welcome his presence into this place to bring healing, you know? And so the priests were the ones who were given special access to minister to God. And now he's saying, you all get special access to minister to me. So what was the number one role of the priest? To minister to God. Love the Lord first. The second one is they had a second main role, is to then minister to other people. This is the other role of the priest. They were meant to pray for people, bless people, pray for healing for people, bring sacrifices on behalf of the people. The next job of the priest was, first it was they minister to God, and then the second one was they minister God to people. And so Israel, you're supposed to be a nation of priests, and then you minister to all the other nations. Out of you, every nation then gets to encounter me, right? This was their calling to be a priesthood as a nation unto their surrounding nations. But I want to show you what happens here. Israel's response to this divine call. In Exodus 20, it says this, Exodus 20 verse 18, when all the people, because they're out in the desert. They left Egypt. They're in the desert. They're by Mount Sinai. And the Lord shows up in a cloud on the top of Mount Sinai. And it makes every Marvel movie look so lame. It's glory on top of a mountain. It's laser beams of lightning. It's trumpet voices. It's wild. We can't even fathom the glory that appears on top of this mountain. And they're seeing this glory. God is showing up and showing off in his glory on top of this mountain. And then it says this, when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off and said to Moses, you speak to us and we will listen. They said this, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die. Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin." So Moses is like, no. He's not trying to make you like afraid and not want to talk to him. He's showing you his glory so that when you want to sin, you'll remember and be like, do I want this little sin or the all-consuming fire? I think I'll go with the all-consuming fire, right? Moses saying, no. That's what he's trying to do here. But it says, but the people stood far off while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. God said, I want you all to be a kingdom of priests. And they said, no. Actually, we'd rather a mediator. We'd rather Moses in the middle. Moses, you talk to him and just tell us what he says. To me, I just wonder, have you ever shown someone who you truly were and then they reject you? Have you been open and honest and then they hurt you and say, I don't want that? This is what happens. God shows them. He says, I want a direct connection to all of you. Here's my glory. And they say, no, you're coming on a little strong, God. It's a little too much for me. I'd rather not talk to you. Can you talk to Moses and have him talk to us instead? Imagine the heartbreak of the Lord saying, no, it's not what I want. I want all of you. It says they stepped back, but Moses drew near. So who is called to the priesthood? I believe it's anyone who will draw near. Anyone who says, I will step near the Lord, even when I don't understand. I want him regardless. That's the call in the priesthood. And you may say, oh, Israel, I would never do that, right? And that's easy because we know the ending of the story. We look back in hindsight, right? No, but I'm telling you, we probably would have done this. And the reason I know we probably would have done this is because many of us do this still today. Where the Lord is saying, hey, I want direct relationship with you. And we're like, yes, I want to know you, Lord. I want to walk with you, Lord. And he's like, oh, so then read my Bible, read my word, get to know the word. And we're like, oh, I would rather pay a pastor to just tell me what you're saying. And then once a week, I'll learn what you're saying. That's asking for a mediator in the middle, right? And God's like, no. You should all be in my word all the time, right? Or, oh, I want to know you, or I want to see transformation. And then he says, so then pray. All of you should be intercessors. All of you should be praying and talk to me. And we're like, oh, I'm not really the prayer guy. Can there be a prayer separate team and I'll do something else, right? That's asking, no, I'd rather a mediator. I'd rather someone else do it. Or evangelism. We're like, Lord, use my life for your glory. And he's like, awesome. See that homeless guy right there? Go talk to him. And we're like, oh, I'd rather a mediator, a homeless ministry that feels called to that. That's not me, right? We do this all the time, right? Right? Children's ministry. We need help in kids' church. Ooh, I'd rather someone else do it. And I'll pay them to do it so I don't have to, right? Come on, we're hard on Israel, but we do the same things, right? And so there's something constant where we're putting a mediator in between us, and God's trying to strip it away and say, no, I want direct relationship with every one of you. And so God, the priesthood, though, it wasn't about religion. He wanted relationship all along. And in Exodus 28:1, so this is what happens. He says, okay, he answers their request. And he says, then bring near to you Aaron, your brother, and his sons with him from among the people of Israel to serve me as priests. So he has to separate out these group of people. Okay, these are the priests then, right? And then you see the tabernacle, which is so amazing. But when you look at it, I wish I had a photo of it, but you can see there's a wall on the outside. And you could go in to the outer courts to kind of bring your sacrifice. And then you would need the priest, once again, on your behalf, right, to sacrifice for you. And then in the middle, there was a section of another tent with a huge curtain. You could not go in there. Only the priest can go in there. So you see another division between me and kind of getting to the presence of God. And then in that area, then there was another curtain that only the high priest could go into on certain occasions. So you see what happens is the separation of layers forms in between God and the people, where he can only talk to this special group of people who then represent the whole country. But this is not the original call of what he wanted, right? And it functions in this kind of structure for the next 1,400 years until we see Jesus come onto the scene. Aren't you thankful for Jesus? And he comes in, and what happened is all the spiritual guys, the Pharisees, are obsessed with the rules and the structure and the mediation, right? No, you're bad, God's good. You can't talk to him, right? You have to follow all these rules. And Jesus comes on the scene, and they try to trap him. And they're like, out of all the rules, what's the most important? And Jesus says in Matthew 23:37, he says to them, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. What is that calling? To say, this is the first thing. Love him first. That's the call of the priesthood. Minister to him, bless him, love him, make him first. Jesus is bringing them right back. This is the original call, the individual relationship with God once again. Knowing him is, I love everything Pastor Matt was saying today. It's not about the head knowledge, which can be good, wisdom, but the heart knowledge of knowing, experiencing him. Right? I went to this school. It was like a Baptist school. David and I used to go there. And I went to their camp, and they asked me to come in and be a guest speaker. And I know they don't really believe in miracles or anything, so I'm kind of flying under the radar with different things. And I'm just praying for the Lord to meet. And I do this call, though, where I'm talking this whole sermon about it's not about the rules. It's not about the structure. It's about the knowing him. It's about the relationship with him. And this girl, and then I kind of went on and said, when you try to overcome sin on your own for the rules, you're not going to be able to do it. When you do it out of love and connection, it compels you to live a holy life. So it's talking about holiness, but rooted in love and encounter with the Lord rather than the rules. This is something I struggled with growing up in a really, really kind of structural church like that. And so I'm talking this message, and this girl comes up to me afterwards, and she's like shaking, like trembling. And she walks up to me, and she's tearing up, and she said, and a teacher is right there who works at that school. And she says, I heard an audible voice in your sermon. And we're like, what happened? Remember, the teacher doesn't really believe in this stuff too. She's standing right there. And then she says, and I smoke weed. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, like right in front of the teacher at this Christian school. And she said, I smoke weed all the time. And I thought, well, it's a plant. God made it. It's fine. And when you were talking about how love compels you to become holy because you're trying to love him, she said, I just kept thinking, stop smoking weed, stop smoking weed. It's actually hurting your relationship with the Lord. And she said, but then I said, no, that's just this guy. I just have a different mindset, is what she was trying to convince herself. Have you ever tried to convince yourself of something? She's convincing herself. And she said in that moment, I don't even remember this, but she said in that moment, she heard an audible voice say her name. She thought I was calling her out of the crowd, and I wasn't. She heard an audible voice say her name, and then she heard the audible voice say, this moment is for you. And she looked up, and she said, right in that moment, I pointed to her out of the crowd, and I said, God says you need to get a new mindset. Because she said, I just have a different mindset. I said, God said you need to have a new mindset, right? Right in that moment. And then she said, and then it felt like this wave of like weight came on me. And she showed me, she's like, look at my notes. And it was her journal. And it looked like a Richter scale went off. It was like she was writing words, and then it was just scribbles because she started trembling under the power of God. And then she's like, I don't want to do weed anymore. I don't want to do drugs anymore. And the Baptist teacher right there says her name and says, you just heard the audible voice of God calling you unto himself. And she gives her life to the Lord. She repents of the drugs, right? And starts this relationship with the Lord. And she'd been going to a Christian school her whole life. She had heard about, well, you need to do this. If you want to go to heaven, you need to do this and act this way. But she had never had the personal encounter with the Lord. And that's what he wanted all along, right? And then this girl comes up to me after her and she says, hey, you're not like our other preachers. She said, a lot of people come in for our chapel and they know a lot about God and you're not like them. I'm thinking, ow. Like high schoolers are savage. This is ow. And then she says, no. They talk a lot, like they know a lot about him, but you talk like you know him. And she said, I've never thought of like knowing him like a person. And I just said, hey, that's the greatest compliment you get to anyone. That's the whole point of our faith, is not knowing about him. It's knowing him. Knowing him. And so then she prays, right? And that's the call of the priesthood, to know him first. And then I walk out in the back and there's this Chinese kid who's a foreign exchange student from China, and he's like manifesting a demon out in the back. And he's like growling. He's literally growling and like acting like he's throwing up. And I'm like, what's going on, dude? And he says, I can't believe in Jesus. I can't. I'm a communist. I was warned against this before I came here, right? They're going to try to tell you about Jesus in America. Don't believe it, right? But he's like, every time I hear you say his name, though, everything in me says I want to give my life to knowing him. And I just kind of calmly, because no one knew what to do, but I just put my hand on him and I didn't want to make a scene. I just said, in Jesus' name, come out. And then all of a sudden he was free and he just started crying. And he's like, I just want to know Jesus the way you're talking about knowing him. And he gives his life to the Lord right there on the spot, right? This communist kid in China, who now goes back to China, right? All of these, why do I share these stories, is that it's all about first knowing and ministering and loving and looking to him first. All the actions come second, right? And so then Jesus says, the second commandment is what? Love your neighbors as yourself. What is this? It's the second role of the priesthood. Now go minister God to other people. This is the same calling all along. Act like a priest wherever you go. Carry my presence. Behold me. And so what are some practicals for you guys as we kind of come to a close here is in your car, turn off the podcast, turn on worship, and behold him for a moment. Take a 30-second love break and be like, I'm just forgetting. I just need to stop and behold him and minister to him for a moment. In the middle of the stress, stop and be like, let's just behold Jesus for a moment, right? Make moments to minister to the Lord and watch how it kind of reorients yourself, clicks you back in when you're ministering to him first. And so at the very end, Jesus goes to the cross, and it says that when he died on the cross in Mark 15:38, it says the curtain, remember those dividers I was talking about? The curtain was ripped from the top to the bottom. Many of you know this, but I didn't realize till I studied it. This curtain, they say, was probably about 60 feet tall, about 30 feet wide, and at least 4 inches thick. And they said it weighed thousands of pounds, and it would have taken around 216 tons of force to rip this thing. Like, it's impossible to rip this. And it was ripped from the top all the way to the bottom. It was as though God was saying, I am done with this division between me and man. I don't want the mediator. Jesus is the mediator. He's the only priest. I am done with this division. I'm done with this separation. I am done with this thing that's been around for thousands of years. I always wanted a kingdom where every individual had access to me like a priest. And he rips the veil, he tears it, building that connection between us again. And now, not just for Israel, but saying every human, Jew and Gentile, can be my priest. And how does it end? The very ending of the story in Revelations 1:5, it says, to him who loves us and freed us from our sin, that's like this coming out of that slavery in Egypt, freed us from the slavery of sin by his blood. He said, and he made us kingdom, priests to his God and Father. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. The call at the end of the story is the same of right at the beginning, where he said, I am looking for my priests. I'm looking for those who will minister to me first, and out of love with me, minister to the world around them. And this is that final call. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he said that every Christian is a priest, not offering sacrifices, but offering himself to God and then to the world. So just the last point is really more of a question of, will you answer this call to be a priest? To be a priest who carries the presence into your business. Be a priest who carries his presence, loves him, beholds him, and then ministers to others at the coffee shop or in the cubicle at work or as you're driving, or I've gotten into Uber cars, and by the end we were all laughing, talking about how amazing God is and sharing testimonies of God's glory in a 10-minute Uber drive. Like, what happened, right? Is you carry the priesthood wherever you go. And this is a calling. Everyone always says, Pastor, how do I know my calling in life? Like the big scary calling. Let me tell you, this is your calling. You're a priest. You're a priest. Everything else, you might do a career here or there, or it could change. But the calling to first love him and then overflow to love everyone else, that is your calling, no matter what.